In the Bible, God separates the primordial waters in order to create. Genesis 1:6. In the Enuma Elish, a god separates another goddess who represents the primordial seas and uses the two halves of her body to create heaven and earth. In the Bible, the story begins when no plant was in the field or shrub was on the earth. Genesis 2:5. In Enuma Elish, the story begins when no field was formed and no marsh was on the earth. In the Bible, God suggests, "Let us make man." Genesis 1:26. In Atrahasis, a minor god is tired of working for the major gods, so this low deity suggests to his fellow divines that they create mankind to do the work for them. In the Bible, man was formed from the dust to cultivate plant life. Genesis 2:7. In Eridu, Genesis, mankind is fashioned from clay to cultivate the ground and care for animals. In the Bible, eternal life is bound up in the tree of life. Genesis 2:9. In the Epic of Gilgamesh, the hero is afraid of death and goes on a quest for the plant of immortality that will make him eternally youthful. In the Bible, Adam and his wife are naked and unashamed in paradise, and only clothed after gaining knowledge of good and evil. Genesis 2:25 through 3:21. In the Epic of Gilgamesh, a naked, beast-like man who lives among the animals in nature becomes civilized after sleeping with a prostitute who teaches him good from evil. He becomes ashamed of his nakedness and is clothed. In the Bible, a serpent beguiles the woman and the first couple lose access to the tree of life. Etiology is given for why snakes crawl on their bellies. Genesis 3. In the Epic of Gilgamesh, a serpent steals the plant of youthfulness away from the hero who is now destined to die. Etiology is given for why snakes shed their skin. In the Bible, Adam and Eve get expelled from the garden after gaining knowledge. Genesis 3:23 and 24. In the Epic of Gilgamesh, the formerly beast-like man is no longer one with nature and rejected by the animals after becoming civilized. He leaves the forest and heads for civilization. In the Bible, God judges and drowns the entire world with a flood, but warns one righteous man. Genesis 6 through 9. In Atrahasis, the king of the gods judges and drowns the entire world with a great flood, but a minor god warns one exceedingly wise human. In the Bible, the chosen, righteous human is told to build an ark and take 2 of every animal to repopulate the earth. Genesis 6 through 9. In Atrahasis, the chosen, wise human is told to build an ark and take 2 of every animal to repopulate the earth. We will have more to say on the Bible's similarities with these other ancient myths in the following chapter. But for now, the question we must ask is, how do we account for all of these bizarre coincidences? Have you ever read the story of Adapa or heard of the story of Adapa?
No.
This is where the Tree of Life story comes from. Once again, I write about this in Let There Be Gaslight chapter 9. Adapa and the Food of Life is where the Adam and Eve story comes from. And you clearly see what's happening in the story is one God does not want the man to eat from the tree of life because he's going to become too much like the gods. He's got 2 things on the table: wisdom like the gods and immortality like the gods. The gods cannot allow the man to have both. So if he ends up getting immortality without wisdom, cool. There's still distance between the gods and men. If he ends up getting wisdom without immortality, there's still distance. But if he gets wisdom and immortality, he's too much like the gods. And the story of Adapa and the Food of Life, the Genesis chapter 3 story, is a ripoff of Adapa and the Tree of Life. And you see clearly where death comes into play. If you don't eat this food, you're going to die. If you eat the food, you're going to live forever.
How would we know that's a ripoff?
Because Adapa and the Food of Life is a much older story.
Older written story or older oral story?
Well, the Hebrew people are a later people, let alone their language and their stories are just later in general. So the story where you get adopted in the tree of life from, it's an older culture. So yes, written before, but even the people who had the story, they were a people before Israel was a people.